Looks like he's got. Yeah, we can hear you.
You look legendary.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I got to do this down because can you see me?
Nope.
Oh, fuck.
We can see the northern lights or something.
Oh, is it doing right here? Oh, okay, wait, hold on. I gotta switch it. I'm a total idiot. Look at me. Okay, hold on. Okay, video settings. All right.
So maybe it'd be helpful maybe to know when each of you transitioned. Might be kind of relevant to the conversation. So I transitioned 15 years ago. Kenneth, I know you transitioned before I did. So roughly when was that?
I started in 2006 and had my last surgery in 2008. Like I started testosterone in 2006. Had a surgery a year after that.
What about you, Aaron? When did you transition?
I transitioned in 2011. I started testosterone. So yeah, 10 years ago. And then I had top surgery a couple years later. And I've left it as that at that. So health-wise, what that means going down the line has yet to be decided. But yeah, so I've been on testosterone 10 years. I've yet to have anything internally removed. Yeah, it's a constant kind of debate back and forth. Do I cease and desist, cross-sex hormones, or do I have a hysterectomy? And I have yet to decide. But I need to do one or the other.
Why?
Eventually.
Why?
What's up?
Why?
Just because of the cancer risk with taking testosterone and having still the internal anatomy that cannot function on that level of male hormones. So I know what I want to obviously continue with the testosterone, but as far as long-term health, what does that mean? Yeah, exactly. Who knows?
Yeah.
Go get your kids.
Yeah, that's a long story. So I transitioned effectively 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then Scott, I think yours is probably the most recent of the four of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a different experience than all y'all. I was on testosterone for maybe 6 weeks when I got my top surgery. I got all surgeries like within a year. But I was in a different place. I had the money, so it was just like the doctor's like, shing, 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 shing. So for me, I've been fully transitioned, top to bottom. I've had 2 bottom surgeries. So I'm completely, I got nothing else female in me.
So what Kenneth mentioned the word, the beginnings of the affirmation model. So what I'd like to talk about today is actually this new book, brand new book that's come out called Gender Dysphoria, a Therapeutic Model for Working with Children, Adolescents, and Young Adults. And this is by Susan and Marcus Evans in the UK, who have been working. They were previously connected to the Tavistock Clinic, which has been in the press in the recent year. So they're proposing a therapeutic model. So maybe we can just to set the stage for this, just talk a little bit about where we are and a little, just very briefly, a little bit of that history of how trans care has been done. So prior to, Kenneth, you mentioned the affirmation model. So when I transitioned 15 years ago, and it was the very, very beginnings of what we now call the affirmation model. But back then, when I did it, there was still quite a bit of assessment. So I think it was over about a 2 or 3 month period. I had regular appointments and was assessed. But there was no recommendation or expectation that I do any psychotherapy or anything like that. So it was still just assessment of just telling my story, but there was no pushback. There was no exploration of kind of deeper things. And now over the last 15 years, affirmation, which was never to challenge someone's identity. So it means that the clinician stance is you just accept that someone is who they say they are, but the assessment is about things like assessing your capacity to consent, for example. And now that's turned into pure, more and more clinics moving in the direction of pure informed consent, where they even eliminate a lot of the assessment and more of a sign a waiver. And as long as you have the capacity to consent, we'll just start you on medical treatment. So it's moved more and more and more in that direction and away from careful assessment and any psychotherapy. Am I kind of capturing that evolution? Okay.
Yeah, and it's strange, isn't it, though? Because with all the studies that came out that said, hey, medical transition helps kids with mental health, it's, this kind of cure-all, and then all of a sudden all these are retracted or changed, that was when we didn't know that it helped mental health, or we thought it did. We didn't know. It was kind of, slow. Now that we know it doesn't help mental health, the media is not lifting that, but now we're going from, fuck it. You are who you are. It's nuts to me what's happening.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Prior to the affirmation model, there was a lot more emphasis on, because gender identity disorder was in the DSM and it was understood as a mental health condition. And so the emphasis of treatment for gender identity disorder prior to this major shift was looking at it more from psychology. And it was psychologists that led the field. And then we kind of went this far other direction where the only treatment for what's now called gender dysphoria, the only treatment on offer is medicalization and changing her body. And Scott, as he said, like, how strong is the evidence for that? And I don't necessarily want to deny everyone that option. I think I'm sort of in the middle where, if I think we need a lot more research about who exactly benefits from this care and who doesn't. And I do think that we need to bring the psychologists back into the conversation. And so this book, this model that Susan and Marcus are describing here is a psychological model. And I think I've seen them in interviews that they're not opposed to some people medically transitioning, but and I've just started into this book, but I think it might be I think there's a lot of, from thumbing through it, I think there's going to be a lot of really rich content for us to explore, today, starting today. And I would love it if, as I'm reading through this book, if we can come back to it and talk about some of the major talking points. But just looking at the foreword, there's already some really rich material to get us started. So in the foreword, they're setting a little bit of introducing a few concepts. So one of the concepts that they introduce is this idea of outcomes and the quality of research on outcomes of the medicalization. Now, one of the things that they mention is that there haven't been a lot of really good long-term studies on outcomes. And so there's three questions I thought we could start with that they ask here. So, because they're saying that when measuring outcomes, that there's three questions that haven't been answered. So let's just talk about those three. So the first one is, how long after an intervention should such an assessment of outcome be done? Now, it's my understanding that a lot of the outcome surveys and stuff are pretty short term. Asking people, you start them on testosterone, and then I don't know, like, if someone's in your care for a year or whatever, how are you doing? And I know my experience was when I first started testosterone, I felt awesome. I felt great for that short term, right? So what do you think of this question? Like, how long after medicalization or after a certain intervention, be it hormones or surgery, should an assessment be done? What do you think? What do you guys think?
You know what I would kind of like to know? We got 4 trans men here. Who has no regret and would do everything the same? We're all adults here. You would do everything the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you, Kenneth?
No.
Would you?
No. If I knew, yeah. Okay.
No, go ahead, Kenneth. Sorry.
If I knew this meant spending the rest of my life alone, no, I wouldn't do it.
Why are you spending your whole life alone? Where are you at, dude? Let's go out and to a movie or something. We
Oh,
can
sorry.
cuddle.
No,
What's going on?
it's like I'm sexually attracted to women who are sexually attracted to women, so they don't see me.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
I've become invisible to the population of people that I am sexually attracted to. So, yeah.
What about you, Aaron? Would you do it again?
I'm really questioning that. I'm questioning, to what extent did I make this decision based on the ideology that was going around of what the feelings I had meant. Because there was a point in my life prior to moving to Vancouver. I mean, from the age 16 until my early 30s, I was part of the lesbian community. And yes, I was struggling with certain things, but it never occurred to me to get using the old language, to get a sex change. Like that was never on my radar. And I was finding ways of making sense of those feelings in the context of being a lesbian, because a lot of gay and lesbian people talked about having cross-sex identification or having gender identity disorder. So that wasn't unusual in the circles of people in the butch community, for example. That wasn't unusual for butch lesbians to feel that. And so I was making sense of it in the context of a gay and lesbian identity. It wasn't until I moved to Vancouver, because Vancouver is a hot spot. Aaron and I talked about this a little bit last time we talked, that Vancouver is a hot spot for some of these ideologies. And I wonder, had I not moved to Vancouver where I was immersed in that way of thinking, and then saw that documentary on TV that said, well, if you have these kinds of feelings of gender identity disorder, that meant you are a trans person. So it really it really turned my identity on its head, and it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not a lesbian after all. I guess I'm a trans person. So now that's what I'm unpacking. I mean, no doubt at all that I had legitimate gender identity disorder from a very, very early age, and I still do. And this is something that people get confused about. There was a comment on the Benjamin Boyce video I did, a comment about, well, I don't understand. If you're saying you reject the ideology, then how are you trans? But gender dysphoria is different from the gender ideology. I had gender dysphoria long before I learned any of the ideology. So undoing the ideology is making me rethink, like, what were my real options for gender identity disorder? And wishing that some of those other options were on offer, like the psychological parts. And I do think it's possible that I could have learned to live with that and resolve that in ways that didn't involve medicalization.
You know what I find interesting about trans ideology all in general, and we have 4 people here, and there's one person that would do everything the same. For me, I scream so loud about kids, and I tell the truth. I don't care who it offends or whatever. I'm at the point in my life where I've hid who I won't do that anymore. So if you ask me a question, I'll tell you exactly what I feel. I would actually transition again. It has helped me. I would do it differently. And I would do it with better knowledge. But if I had to say, would you do it again or not, black and white, I would do it differently. So I'm not against medical transitioning. I'm not. It has made me more comfortable in this life. I never knew how uncomfortable I was. Gender dysphoria, all that kind of stuff, I think is kind of, I don't know. I'm sorry. I just think it's kind of bullshit.
It's a catch-all.
It's wanting to be the opposite sex. And here's the thing that drives me nuts about gender ideology. And I also think that there are some people that benefit from medical transitioning. It has, if you take all my medical stuff away, it has helped me in certain areas in my life. But I didn't know all the negative. I wasn't given the option of the negative. I wasn't told the negative. We don't know what happens long-term with medical transitioning. Aaron, you said something a couple months ago that just resonates so loud with me. I don't know if you guys have seen it or if it's even up. It was a deposition with the Green Party. And here Aaron is, with all logic, I'm screaming at everybody, tell everybody fuck off. And Aaron's, coming in with all his little logic, and somebody, questions him or something. And he goes, well, I'm a biological woman, and I've got cholesterol issues now. I have to take medicine. I've got heart issues now. So I don't think it's transphobic for me to say that we don't know if I'm going to get women's symptoms of a heart attack or men's symptoms of a heart attack. That's not transphobic. That's common basis, common knowledge, right? But saying that kind of stuff makes you transphobic. And so when you start talking about ideology, it reminds me of something that most people in the LGBT hate, which is religion, which is, the ideology of God, because you can take that belief in God, whether or not people want to admit it or not, and you can wrap it up however it suits you. And you can take ideology and you can wrap it up however it suits you. You can make that fit whatever feeling you have. And those two things are dangerous. So when we're talking about what is trans and what isn't trans is whatever the fuck you want it to be. Just like religion is whatever the fuck you want it to be. And that's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous for me. So
yeah, and I think that's why we're all here, right? It's because the ideology has taken over healthcare. So it's the religion of gender and has nothing to do, or I mean, it's being propagated by medical intervention. But nobody outside sees. Well, some people do. They just lose their jobs if they say so. See how an ideology has taken over what should be measured and intensive healthcare. Going back, when I say I would do it all over again, exactly the same, it's because yes, I feel I lived with the discomfort that I didn't even know the extent of the discomfort until it went away, and it was such a relief. But then again, so I say I would do it all over again. I also wonder though, if I had been given the cognitive tools to deal with dysphoria without altering my body, that probably would have been a better long-term solution.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with what I knew at the time, I would do it all over in a heartbeat, because it actually brought more relief than I even had anticipated going into it. So so in that sense, I'm very very, very happy with my transition. One thing, like what Kenneth was saying, is I remember thinking, was like, this will render me alone. Like that's what I was thinking going into it. But that for me, that was like something that it was a bargain I was willing to make. But I wasn't a lesbian before. I was only attracted to men before. Testosterone altered my sexuality in the other direction.
Really?
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think I'm the only one here who wasn't a lesbian originally.
Now you date women.
Yeah. Well, my partner, long-term partner, is a fellow trans man. But yeah, when I originally started testosterone, within weeks, my sexual orientation dramatically shifted from men toward women, and has mellowed out somewhere in the middle now. But yeah, I think nope. We're not taught, we're not instructed to kind of consider what physical transition does to your body, what that does to like the social sphere you are in, how the world is going to interpret you. And I see that so often with, because I think for us, for trans men, it shifts so dramatically. Like once you're on testosterone, you suddenly occupy a completely different space in the world. And I loved every minute of it. But for a lot of people, that's a lot to suddenly be thrust on a person without any external, without the tools or even the template of those who've come before you to really follow.
But Aaron, you have to say, Terrell, Aaron, what you said, I completely understand. Here's the problem. We had to medically alter our bodies, shave off 12 years of our life. I've got heart and lung damage. People wonder why I'm so intense on stopping, medical transition, because I'm not going to live very long. I don't know if you guys see my videos and stuff. Some days I look rough. I don't feel well. I'm sick still, and I will be sick. I won't be here long. So my intensity is because people need to know this. That wasn't an option for me on my health. And the truth is this, is would we have had to transition, had to do this to our body, had I not understood and accepted psychology with, you know, my psychological stuff, who I am, if I accepted me, if society's accepted me, if all of this was accepting, would I have to miss the years I'm going to spend, not be spending with my grandkids? Because I'm not going to be here probably more than 5-10 years. I mean, is that an option? If psychology, if, you know, I learned how to handle the fact that the type of woman I am was not accepted in society. I mean, it was not accepted even in the gay community. I mean, when I talk about who I am, and I know it seems harsh right now, right? As a man, it seems harsh. But you know what? You put me in a room full of men, salesmen or whatever, and all of a sudden I'm the fucking alpha. Scott, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's going on? How are we gonna do this? Oh my God, you're so cool. He's an asshole, but he's really not. It wasn't like that as a woman. I was the same woman where I'd walk in and go, sit down, shut the fuck up, give me my numbers. You can talk about who you fucked later. Let's go. And people were like, and they didn't like that. You know, they didn't like the fact that I looked like Gillian Anderson in the business suit and all that kind of stuff. And so I never fit. So outside of that, I mean, I had respect, but then everybody was like, you know, pew, 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 pew. Now after meetings, people are like, hey, Scott, what do you want to go? You want to go get something to eat, or what's going on? They don't know I'm trans. But so here's my point, Aaron. All that stuff that we had to go through to get soothing, is it worth the physical health for people? Or is it basically that we don't know what the fuck happens to people when they medically transition? Doing it to children is a travesty. Who needs to change, the medical industry or society? Because I haven't changed, and I tell this to you know, the moms, I haven't changed. This has not changed. When I'm out in business meetings and I'm closing deals and stuff, I mean, I do things where I just walk out of meetings and go, wow, that was easy. That was so easy. Where it would take me, you know, 10 closes as a woman. I used to call it cockfighting, where the men used to want to, you know, see if they could knock me down. And once I got that, then they were like, okay, yeah, we'll listen to Kelly. Kelly knows what he's doing. Now it's just like I say something and they're like, we'll take it. So that's my question.
The misogyny inherent in the system.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, if I'm kind of reading the room right, it sounds like our transitions for all of us solved a certain problem for each of us. And that problem might have been different for each of us, but we do feel some relief from that problem. But the question is, was this the only and best way of solving that problem?
Exactly.
So when they're talking about outcome measures, how do we measure that, right? Like, how do we measure, okay, so someone were to survey all of us, like, did transition help you? Well, yeah, it did. So in terms of, in some ways, but caused other problems. So in terms of outcome measures, like, how would we measure whether this is an appropriate intervention when we're all saying, well, yeah, I do feel some comfort from having done this, but that doesn't necessarily prove that it was the best and correct intervention?
I don't think we'll know the answer to that. Sorry, Kenneth, go ahead.
I was going to say the alcohol and drug treatment industry, especially in BC, was hit hard, like with the outcome measures study that showed that unlimited access to detox, which is a 7-day intervention where people aren't able to access drugs or alcohol. So unlimited access to detox resulted long-term, and these were when they were doing 5, 10, 15, 20-year outcome measures. It shortened people's lifespan. So now there was put an absolute unlimited access to detox. So detoxification for people with drugs and alcohol resulted in shortening people's lifespan. People died faster, sooner, harder. When they limited access to detox, so now you have to wait. So what it was in BC is you could walk into a detox center and be admitted that day. And then they put in a 1-week waiting period. So putting in the 1 week waiting period, limiting the access to detox, resulted long term in increased lifespans of people with addictions, because then there was all sorts of theories about it, but there are no 5, 10, 15, 20-year studies. Like, I haven't been contacted by Trans Health BC to find out what do I think of having transitioned now that it's 15, 20 years later. But I was certainly contacted by them to find out if I wanted to have a phalloplasty when phalloplasty got funded.
Did you have that, by the way?
No,
Paleo?
no, I didn't end up having it.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do it.
Yeah, I was looking into it for lots of complicated reasons, but I found out in the end that it wouldn't necessarily have helped any of the issues I was looking at having it for. So yeah.
Yeah, and likewise, nobody's contacted me, 15 years later and asked how's it going, and I don't go to the same clinic anymore, and the surgeon that did my metoidioplasty hasn't been in contact with me to see how it's going. So I don't know how they're really capturing.
They're not. But the problem is that people aren't talking. People aren't talking. It's strange for us to be talking like this in public. Now, we all talk to each other in private, and it almost feels like you are going against your tribe. But the fact is that if we pull most people apart, or pull most trans people apart and talk to them without any buffer, there's always, I don't know if I would have done this. Maybe I would have done this different. And what I found, and I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but what I found was after transition was complete, and it's another thing that you said, Aaron, that is just, Aaron Kimberly, that just resonates so incredibly, is the process of transition, the length of transition and the steps of transition almost solidifies that you're going to finish it, because the idea that this is going to fix everything, but you have hormones, and then you have surgery, and then you have another surgery, and then you've got your hair coming in, and then you've got your name change, and then you got your bottom surgery, and then you got this, you got that. And there's so many years that it takes. And the reason why I think the only long-term study shows that we're more suicidal after transition, because at some point we all have to sit back and go, wow, that didn't fix a fucking thing. It's an inside job. And so you sit back and do it. Here's the frightening thing that I have with children, is that the children that are medically transitioning, or the ones that we're pushing to medically transition, all have comorbidities, autism, depression, anxiety, bipolar, gifted, all these things. They don't fit in. And so at a time when they're trying to figure out where they sit in the world, and they have to go through that hard period where you sit in your room, and I think we've all been there, where you cry and go, God, I wish I would fit in. I wish I fit in. I wish, and you didn't. And so you built that in your body, that, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm different, and that's okay. I got through it. I'm different, and that's okay. I had my crying period, and I got through it, and I got stronger. They're missing that period. Those kids are missing that period. They're missing that period because society and the medical industry is saying, hey, there's a pill for this. So they're not dealing with that difference. They're not dealing with those comorbidities. They're not getting that foundation we all get as children. And those are the kids that are 19 and 20 years old that don't have that underneath them, that are going, all right, now I'm going to kill myself. And we need to start talking about that. We need to. And people won't talk about it. I've seen suicide notes. I get, the detransers. These are all people that were pushing through that time in life, or not getting that foundation. They're killing themselves. So getting them to transition with they're going to kill themselves, they're right. It's just after that it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you said, once you start the interventions, I agree that there's sort of this there's this forward pull. Like once you start, because people have said, well, at what point could you just stop and go back? So I remember starting the hormones and thinking, okay, this I mean, the change from the hormones is slow. So I remember kind of watching those changes and feeling like, okay, it's happening, and I was excited, but I hadn't arrived yet, right? It still hadn't fixed the thing that I was hoping to be fixed. And I still didn't feel like I had arrived at this mysterious destination that I was after. And so then you think, well, maybe that's just because I haven't done the next step. So, okay, so I'm going to get the mastectomy, and maybe that's what is going to kind of help me to feel like I've arrived. And that didn't really do it. And then, so you kept taking the next step and next step, think, I've just not done my transition yet, right? So you think, oh, I just got to finish the transition, and then I will have, it'll. And I wasn't expecting it to fix everything. Like, I don't think I went into it thinking, oh, this is going to solve all of my problems. But even for me, that you're right, that like I wasn't feeling better, so I got to take the next step. I'm not feeling better. I need to take the next step until you've reached the end of everything that can be done for you medically. And then the real work starts, right? And so some people, when they reach that point, they've done everything that they can do. They've got their bottom surgery, they got their mastectomies, they got everything done. Well, oh shit, now what, right? And so I think part of why I'm happier and in a much better place is that isn't because necessarily of the medical interventions. That work started when all those medical interventions, I kind of ran out of options at that point. And now I'm like, okay, well, now I need to dig in and do the hard work here.
The hard work, right?
The internal work, because there's nothing more medically that can be done. So you're right. That's for some people, that's the point maybe that they bottom out and become suicidal. Fortunately, in my case, that was just I think I had done enough of my internal work over the last 15 years that when I reached that point, yes, it was hard, but I stayed on my feet and dug into the emotional work that I need to do. But
now,
that's not really talked about.
Aaron, if you didn't go through what you went through as a teenager. We all know when I'm talking about the crying in the room, everybody does it, even people that fit. People like us that really don't fit, we did that work, right? Take that work away, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
You did as a kid. That you cried to your parents, go, I don't fit and that sucks. And your parents go, well, Aaron, you got life is tough and try this and try that. And you built that core, right? That core of strength.
Yeah.
Remove that core. Take you back to that place where you had to do the internal thing. Tell me you wouldn't be more suicidal. Now, when people ask me why I'm so freaked out about kids, that's why. Because I'm the most vocal trans about this. So guess who reaches out to me? These kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't sleep very much. You know why? No, I'll find a suicide clinic. Hold on. Aaron, this person's killed himself. Stella. What am I going to do? That's what I'm doing. And that's what we need to acknowledge. These kids have no foundation.
What I've really dug into when I reached that point, I really dug into my history as a lesbian because there was so much strength, right? It modeled for me of how do we build a community. Like I came out at a time where our only lesbian bar in Winnipeg was kind of this underground seedy little bar that, you had to have a membership to enter or else members had to sign you in. And pride marches were 100 people, with homemade placards. There were no big, bright, rainbows and sparkles and people cheering us on. It was a march to say enough with the homophobia, and we had skinheads circling it. So I've experienced some real hardship, but also resilience, having lived part of my life in the lesbian community, and that's a big source of strength for me. Seeing how that got done, right? Seeing how a community was built, seeing how basic civil rights were won. So you're right. Like if I didn't have that lived history, and I did this as a teenager, and then bottomed out, what would have been my strengths and resources?
Yeah, what would you have been your percentage that you probably would have committed suicide or tried suicide? A lot higher. It's transphobic not to talk about that. How about that?
Yeah. When I bottomed out, I quit my job and went truck driving. Like I left Vancouver.
Everybody's got a story. Bottom out. You had that foundation. What would have happened, Kenneth, if you didn't have that foundation? If at 13, a doctor looked at you and went, Kenneth, it's not your fault. You were born a man. all of the discomfort that you're feeling, it's gone. It's going to go away. Thank God. We have a prescription. Here's the prescription. Stop crying in your room. It's not your fault. You're not wrong. It's this. This is it. And then take that to the time where you went truck driving. Don't tell me that you wouldn't have thought about killing yourself.
Oh yeah. Well,
That's what we need to talk about.
Yeah, I consider myself lucky because I went through a stage where you had to be referred to a psychiatrist to get surgery. And the psychiatrist I was referred to said, I don't think you're transsexual because you don't know and you haven't addressed your sexuality. What are you sexually attracted to? Who are you sexually attracted to? What kind of sexual relationship do you see yourself being in? Do you see yourself as a man married to a woman? Do you see yourself as a man wanting to be with a man now as a homosexual male? So I luckily had the work that he had me go through before he'd approve my testosterone to fall back on, because he had me address a whole bunch of stuff that the affirmations model doesn't even look at, you know. And I really didn't really address it until I had a lesbian look at me and say, well, I'm not attracted to men, so I don't want to date you. Yep. And that's when it hit me, and it was 2 months after that I went truck driving. Yep. But yeah, exactly what you're talking about. If all of you get is yes, 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 you don't know how to deal with the no appropriately when it comes. Yep. You know, was that person transphobic? No, she was simply attracted to women, right?
Yep. And you don't look like one biologically.
Exactly.
You don't look like a woman. I always say,
exactly.
Getting to the funny stuff. For me, people say, what is the biggest surprise about seeing the world with male eyes? And I shit you not. It's the fact that I've realized that some women are attracted to men. I thought they were faking it. I really did. Because, you know, I always had the, you know, I'm straight. And then the door would close at, you know, hotel business meetings and something. And all of a sudden, you know, Tiger Tina comes out. And I'm like, I thought you were straight. You know, so I always thought that it was just, all these women were faking it. And my ex, who I live with, this is my best friend. We watched this one movie where Steve Carell, have you ever seen his movie where he's like this dork and this person's trying to make him into this stud dude or whatever? Yeah. Do you see that? Yeah. There's a place in there that my ex watches all the time and cracks up, where he's dressing and there's this beautiful woman helping him dress with a, you know, cool dude trying to teach him how to be cool. And the cool guy goes, you'd sleep with him, wouldn't you? And she goes, yeah, I would. And he's like, what are you saying? That's me, you know, so there's lots of fun stuff with transitioning too. But anyways, so.
Yeah.
I was thinking when Kenneth, you were talking about seeing that the psychiatrist, the psychologist who made you kind of drill into your you know, what you were after. You know, when I was considering bottom surgery, I went and saw a therapist because it was required, because my work insurance was going to cover it. Finally, I just needed to actually see a therapist. I never saw a therapist for gender transition because I was 27, no mental health comorbidity, so I was just signed off all the way until I wanted to get the bottom surgery. And so I went and saw this marketed as queer friendly therapist who told me I could tell her whatever I wanted and she would write me the letter because she didn't believe in gatekeeping. And that's when the kind of bottom fell out for me. Like, this is not healthcare. This is not safe or reasonable on any level. And yeah, that's kind of where I halted things and didn't go any further, because I was like, what? Maybe this is a religion and it is not healthcare. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Do you think that the conversation, like a thorough assessment and a conversation about some of those deeper things, do you think that would have been harmful for you in any way?
No. And if it would be harmful to anyone, that's a problem right there, right? Like if you can't have those deep, serious conversations about your motivations or what brought you to this point or what, what's going on internally, if you can't have that conversation, you certainly aren't mentally capable to have majorly invasive surgery for cosmetic reasons. Like we're going about this safety narrative is completely backwards.
So Kenneth, for you, when the psychiatrist was asking questions about, your sexual orientation and those kinds of things, was that harmful for you?
Well, it was helpful in that he was also giving me a set of tools to look at, examine, and address those issues, even though, like, I never understood what he was talking about. But he said, you have a fork and you're digging a hole, and a fork is not a good tool to dig a hole. So how about try this big spoon? Okay, so it's still not working for you to use this big spoon to dig this hole. So this is what a small shovel is. This is how a small shovel works. By the end of the 2 years working with him, I understood how to use a fucking backhoe to dig a hole.
Yeah, that's priceless.
So I didn't address the issue of my sexual attraction until I was actually faced with it. When I was faced with it, I understood what it was. I understood the cognitive dissonance I experienced in that moment. And I didn't just go spiraling down in an uncontrolled spiral. I had something to fall back on. I had a
foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what these kids are going to be.
I had a structure on which to go forward. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it doesn't have to be an either or where we either do the psychological work or do the medical transition. And this is where I think we've gone so horribly wrong, is that even the medical part, it's still a psychological process that probably, who knows? I mean, that could be the rest of my life that I'm working on that process. So even if someone chooses to medically transition, doing that psychological work up front and through the transition, I think how is that harmful? Like that goes a long way to being an emotionally and psychologically healthy person. So for some people, I think doing that psychological work, they may realize, well, that's enough, and now I don't need to medically transition. Some may still want to medically transition, but just be able to do it in a much more healthy, sane way so that their medical transition is more successful.
Here's what I don't understand is it seems like people that we're pushing to medically transition as people who have medically transitioned are the worst people to medically transition. Of course, kids, suicidal kids, worst people to medically transition. It's not going to get better. People that can't handle being called the pronouns that they see, that people see and hear, and they flip out because they can't handle that. Those are the worst people to medically transition. All the things that trans radicals are pushing, don't misgender me. Well, then don't look like the opposite gender. I mean, it's just nuts. The people that we're pushing to medically transition are the worst people, unequivocally, to do it. And so when somebody argues with me and goes, well, I'm going to kill myself if I don't medically transition, I go, well, then there's a no. There's an absolute no. We need to lock you up and figure out that before you even consider that. But for some reason, that's transphobic to say. People that can't handle stuff. Yeah, you're great for medically transitioning. Us, we've been through it. It's hard.
I feel like they're all encouraged to have an external locus of control, and that's basically going to it can never end well.
Yeah, I mean that attitude of give me what I want is now and as fast as possible. I mean, we see that attitude playing out in other areas of the world and how they're living their lives, right? Like, what do you mean you won't date me as a trans person? Well, I mean, it's breeding this sense of mental instability and entitlement that people just need to give me what I want when I want it, right? It's like you did the hormones. Well, how far can I push that to my dating world or my employment world or and how mentally healthy is that? And we're seeing all these societal problems and these very unstable people being transitioned, and that's the backlash, and that is, we're all feeling that backlash, right? And when people are out there and they're not mentally well, it's fueling even greater hostility towards all of us as trans people. And I feel like the direction that the clinical world has taken plays a role in that. I think they're responsible for that poor mental health outcome.
I feel like I was pushed to medically transition by professionals. I really do. I mean, I talk about that. I mean, the first therapist I ever saw, it was probably about 5 o'clock, and it was after work. And I talk about this. I had female slacks on and a shirt, and I had earrings on. I mean, I wasn't butch at all, but I wasn't overtly, dressed up or had a lot of makeup on. And, she asked me, well, how long have you been dressing like a man? And I was like, I was in such a vulnerable place, even at 40 years old. I was in a relationship with a woman who was convinced that I was a man because of my personality. How misogynistic is that? I had a therapist tell me that, how long have you been? And so even at 40, 142, I kind of went, oh God, this has been the problem my whole life. When I went to a medical person to get my, my female stuff taken out, well, have you ever been tested for intersex? Your jaw is this. And I was like, oh wow. I mean, even to the point where, 2 weeks before my phalloplasty, I was seeing a therapist because I was pissed off at my wife because everything was about making sure people didn't know I was trans. And, she said I was very angry. I said, yeah, I'm very fucking angry. And I don't think I want to do this phalloplasty, getting pushed to do that. And she goes, well, what's going to be different if you wait a year to do the phalloplasty? Well, bitch, maybe I would have known that the doctor I was getting it with has 9 medical malpractice cases in San Francisco, can't conduct surgery in California, and has about 57 other people that he's mutilated. Maybe I would have had time to figure that out within a year. And so it was just, for me, even at 40 years old, that affirmation of, it's not your fault. You're not different. You were supposed to be this. This is going to fix it. Took me for a loop. Mm-hmm. And Aaron, I do know people that medical transition has helped. I do. But I'm sorry, you're never going to get me to say that it's anything other than cosmetic surgery. It's nothing more than lipstick that women wear, or boob jobs, or, and until, I always say this, until women are running down the street with their tops off, showing off their double Ds, convincing everybody that they didn't get plastic surgery, they were born with them. That's what's happening. And it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about outcomes, Aaron, I think we're like, yeah, we don't know how to measure. Well, there currently isn't a system in place, and that's going to be different depending on age and the actual sex of the individuals in question. But I think even once we do know how to measure the outcomes and weigh the pros and cons here, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to determine that we have been solving software problems with carving up hardware, and there's no way it's going to be deemed. History is going to look back absolutely aghast that we did this. And while yes, I do feel a great sense of relief from my physical transition, we are, yeah, that's all I can say is we're solving software issues by carving up hardware, and it's completely unsustainable and will ultimately be deemed unethical.
And trans activists, I'm sorry, but trans activists like Morgan Ogre and stuff, let me tell you, history is not going to fare lightly on her. History is going to be like, looking back on, how did Hitler convince everybody that Jewish people needed to be killed? How did Ogre convince a whole country that, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same thing. And it surprises me how we can allow people like Ogre to speak the kind of stuff that she speaks, and nobody says anything in your country. The fact that she can't stand up and talk to anybody that's trans about anything. It's got to be quotes but as soon as you say something to her, she like skewers like a rat. Mm-hmm. And these are the people that your country's Canada's going, yep, okay. What does Ogre say? Ogre says the wall's purple. The wall's purple.
Okay, I've got a side question that'll just take us a step back a moment, but Did anyone get questioned regarding their culture's tradition regarding sex and gender roles? Like, I'm Norwegian and Scottish, so in both of my traditional cultures, I have a tradition of strong this whole idea that you can't be a woman because you want to do A, B, C, or D basically didn't really exist in my culture. But that was never addressed at all by the affirmations people during my transition process. That was something that the psychiatrist asked me about, but I never really looked into until after I was confronted with the fact that you're not a woman as I see a woman. Like, visually, your presentation is not something I see as female and attractive. So
I barely remember my hormone readiness assessment, really, but I don't remember that being asked, that cultural or just kind of family dynamics piece really being talked about.
yeah, I know it's a step back from where we were at, but it goes back to that. Sorry, I got my dog she's bored.
He's cute. Or she.
It goes back to that question of long-term outcomes, right? Because like my parents have passed away, and I'm learning more and more about just how much gender nonconformity went on in my family. Like in the 1930s, 1940s, my grandmother allowed all of her daughters to wear pants. Actually, she made all the clothing for her family. So she made the jeans for her daughters to wear. So we're talking 1940s high school in Canada. And she allowed her children to wear jeans because that's what they wanted to do. There was not when I question whether or not I would have done this, I look a lot at, nobody had me look into how was the expression of your sex and your gender dealt with in your traditional context. And that frustrates me because.
So you feel like you weren't able to express yourself as a butch woman? Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, my problem with trying to express myself as a butch woman in the lesbian community was the butches who were physically attracted to me kept telling me I had to be a femme because they found me physically attractive. Because, I was, 150 pounds thinner and blonde-haired, blue-eyed. So they found me attractive. So they told me I couldn't possibly be butch because I had to be femme.
The same thing happened to me.
Yeah. I mean, so, I found the butch femme thing for me, there were aspects of it that worked because my masculinity was seen and validated, and there was a way for me to express it. But the scene is also it's very limited. Like it sort of models itself after 1950s dating, courtship rituals and stuff. And so you kind of had to learn, read 1950s dating books to figure out how to do it. Walk on this side of the sidewalk, not this side of the sidewalk, and so.
Isn't that the truth?
It still was based on these rules, not unlike gender ideology now, where there's these certain rules that you have to follow. Like, at what point do I just get to be myself, right?
Right. Yeah. Isn't homophobia alive and well? Is alive and well. And the fact is that lesbians come all feminine, not feminine, butch, androgynous, and same with, gay guys. It's hilarious to me when people think that only gay men are oh, how's it going? No, it's like gay men come all different ways, and so do lesbians. And so, unfortunately, I think the transgenderism is the fact that we have superseded homophobia. that nobody's talking about. It's still there.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
Yeah, and there were there was these little. There isn't a single LGBT community. There's a bunch of little communities, right? And like the butch femme scene and the leather scene and like all these different. I was joking with you, Scott, the other day about the lesbian baseball, the lesbian baseball teams scene with their
I miss my calling.
caps, the caps put worn backwards and stuff, and so there's these different scenes, but there are places where certain gay and lesbian people can carve out spaces for themselves, but there's still those of us that are these like outliers for some reason and still don't fit into any one of these scenes easily because we're not butch enough or we're not femme enough or we're not this or that or so in terms of outcome measures, I don't know how we measure outcomes in a really accurate way because it's not as simple as yes, I'm happy or no, I'm not happy. Like it depends, right? And just because we are happier doesn't mean there wasn't another path to being happy that could have equally worked or better or worked better or at least avoided some of the medical complications that we're having. But the other thing about outcome measures, there's other things that make that hard. I mean, one is you can't just cherry pick and survey certain people that are within this, really active in the trans community and utilizing services because so many of us have left that or never belonged in the gay and lesbian community, right? Like you, Aaron, that was never your scene. And so it sounds like even like now that's not really, you're not really active in the community. So I mean, just collecting that sample, like how would they reach us? Like Kenneth, you're on the road and, truck driving and we've all kind of scattered different places in the country. So we're not the ones being surveyed. Is a problem. So it's a very biased sample that they tend to get. And B,
I turned into a lesbian, by the way. I went and got my hat.
Awesome. So now we won't misgender you.
Are you attracted to me now, Ken? Can we cuddle now?
Oh yeah, I love it. Well, you know what? I've talking about misgendered. I've gone through my social media. I mean, it's not a whole bunch of places, but I've put down for my pronouns I, me, my, and it.
What?
Because I'm figuring if it. Well, you know what? If they're gonna play the game, they have violated all the rules of English grammar. So I have a male social gender presentation. That makes me a lot more comfortable in the job that I'm now working in. I no longer have to deal with all the bullshit of heterosexual males hitting on me. That's just like completely disappeared. And I find the gay males who do hit on me are a younger crowd. And so approaching me as a younger man, they're very respectful. In how, so I have all of that advantage and I appreciate that advantage, but I'm also sexually attracted to women who are attracted to women, so I no longer really see myself as having a identity that I invest in as far as gender goes. So as far as the politically correct, the trans radical activist rules around gender, I don't see myself as having one. So when I do get sent these surveys going, do you identify as blah, 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 I don't tick into any of their boxes, so I don't answer their surveys because their surveys don't capture me where I am going. I'm more identified now with radical feminists than I had been in the last year learning about what trans radical activists are doing. Trans radical feminists say I'm no longer a woman because I've crossed the line of masculinity to the point where I no longer qualify for that category. And then I had the lesbian feminists telling me that people couldn't call me she or her or Kelly, which is my birth name,
Mine too.
because that's
Got two Aarons and two
transphobic or
Kellys here.
whatever.
I know, right?
Yeah. So I'm no longer entitled to that name. And then I got gender ideology coming at me, and I'm going, I don't identify with any of this stuff. So I got backed up and I went, okay, yeah. So I no longer have a gender identity category. So I'm picking those pronouns that are actually gender neutral and singular.
I don't care about pronouns.
Because I think sometimes they do that just to make other people uncomfortable.
The only time I have
So
problems
I
with
decided to make them uncomfortable.
the only time I have problems with pronouns, and I very rarely do have, I really don't, is when if somebody does a comment like after I do an interview and they go, let's be real, it's a she. And I was like, oh, thanks, Captain Obvious. I mean, it's just asshole. I just don't understand that. Other than that, it's like, what are you going to do? Teach us that the world is not flat now? I mean, come on. But other than that, I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing about the surveys is I'm not sure how honestly people are really answering them either. Like, especially if they're immersed in the ideology, they've got blinders on that makes it really hard for them to take in any information that it contradicts the ideology. So I think for them to question the appropriateness of the intervention, to question the appropriateness and the effectiveness of their physical transition, I think they just can't go there, a lot of them, in their minds. They just can't. And they feel such a loyalty to the community that I think a lot of them are going to answer those questions dishonestly because they feel like they don't want to compromise the community, or they don't want to ruin anyone else's transition, or
you know what, Aaron?
I don't know if I'm seeing that right, but
no, you are absolutely totally. You know what I think is interesting that you just said that just popped in my head was that trans people don't want to talk. Trans radicals don't want to talk to people because then it invalidates this theory that they have. It makes them think. And when you think, you kind of look back and go, this is all bullshit, kind of a thing. And I'm going to piss people off. That's cool. I do it for a living. It's the same thing as kind of evangelicals, very, 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 very religious people. Have you ever noticed? They don't talk to people that don't believe the way that they believe because it's going to push them to think. And if you push somebody to think about religion in general, you cannot not question religion and have open conversations. So you have evangelicals that sit right here in this little group and they all kind of jack each other off that, oh yeah, this is how I believe and I can't do this. And you got over here, the trans radicals, they're all jacking each other off. And, the people in the middle that make sense are never heard. The fact is that if you intertwine the evangelicals with different people and you intertwine the trans radicals with different people, they're all going to come out and go, well, I was fucked. It's like a cult mentality on both sides. And it's the reason why there's little, rat packs. It's the reason why Morgan doesn't talk to anybody. She does her little, oh, I'm going to say this and then pop out. No, oh, transphobic. And then run away because I can't have a conversation with her without her not looking like an asshole by the end of it. So.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that going back to the question of a survey, like I'm not good on my stats and stuff, but there was a review of the research. There's a term for that. So the review said that the methodology that was the research where there was sound methodology, so the larger sample sizes, stuff like that, indicated that it was on suicidal ideology. But one of the questions they brought up was regarding a small sample sized research paper where there were 32 respondents to the survey. And it commented that there was no control as to how many times an individual could answer the survey because it was an online survey. And everything else about this review of the research paper was thrown entirely out of the issue, and they were called transphobic because they questioned the research methodology of this study, saying that transitioning helped people with suicidal ideations. So with all of the present methods they're using, online research has become very, very popular. And there's no control in online research as to how many times an individual answers that survey. All you got to do is create another email address. Like that's what this one survey had said. And it's true. So there's a subsection of the population who are overly emotionally invested in a specific outcome happening, so they're answering these surveys more than once in order to push the outcome in the direction that they believe is that way. It's their truth, therefore it has to be the truth.
Yeah, and the other issue with quality of evidence is, the gold standard in medicine, you need a control group, right? Like, so we have to, when we're comparing outcomes, we have to be able to compare that to something else in order to really evaluate the quality of that outcome. And what's the control group? Right. So it's not like we have one cohort that had psychological interventions and one cohort had the medical interventions, and then we compare like who turned out better. Like we don't have that. So we're doing the best to kind of limp through and make the most of what we've done and what was offered to us. But we really have no idea, like, where would I be today if I had taken a different path?
Do you think we ever will have that kind of that control group where there's a certain cohort? I would think of a specific age and natal sex, and then same cohort sent through like cognitive therapy versus physical transition. I agree with you, Scott. I don't think that will never happen. But that would be interesting to see. Obviously,
I'll say this until the day I die. What's happening right now, what we're watching, what we're involved in, it's like how people look back on Hitler in Germany. I'm serious. In 25, 50 years, people are going to be having wine, going, how did they convince a generation of kids without any medical studies, no evidence it helps, no evidence on what it does to physically? How could we let a generation of males die from osteoporosis at 35? How did we, do this to lesbians and gay people? It's going to be outrageous what people are talking about in 50 years. We are watching that thing in history that we all look back on and go, God, that would have been amazing to see how that worked. We're involved in it. We are unequivocally involved in it.
I agree with you. When people say it's like akin to electroshock and lobotomy, I can see that, except
It's worse.
Much worse, so much more invasive, and we're doing it to perfectly healthy children for religious. I think we all do keep going back to being religiously motivated, because that's the only thing that explains the capture. Yeah,
they're connected because they are the same. The ideology that holds evangelicals together, which you cannot hold that together if you challenge it. You just can't. I don't care how many people I piss off. The evangelicals, you cannot hold that together unless you hold everybody else out, and everybody within that circle's jacking each other off. And if somebody looks off, go, no, right here.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with transgenderism. When you pull that apart, it shatters. But the problem I think that we have is being who we are, being marginalized, dealing with the things that we have done, there is a point at which medical transitioning can help some people, but it's not a cure-all. It's cosmetic surgery, and it's nothing deeper than that. And that is not transphobic to say it. So we need to break up those parties. And guys, that's what we're doing, by the way. Those transphobic stuff, I might be the loudest, the most grotesque, and the screaming because I don't have very much time to mess around. But you guys, when I'm not here, you got to break that stuff up. You got to and you don't have to be hateful and loud like me, but you got to go in and go, I don't know if that makes sense. And get those people away from each other, and just like talk to them, because that is emotionally the most beneficial for these kids. These kids have got to have people in those conversations, making them think. You got to make people think, however you do it. And you can be afraid of not wanting to be out or this or that, but I'm telling you, we're saving lives. We are absolutely unequivocally saving lives.
Aaron, we were talking last week, speaking so I grew up evangelical Christian, and I see the exact things you're talking about, Scott, happening. But one of the things that the house of cards that is trans is built on is this idea that we got two different fronts, right? You got the serious medical condition that has to be dealt with medical transition, otherwise, you'll kill yourself, yada yada. And then the other side of that coin is that it's all just this internal gender identity that's really quite that's the religious portion of it all, and these two kind of the gender identity versus gender dysphoria camps completely exist in conflict. They're always contradicting each other, and so that's we know it colloquially as the too cute versus true scum or transmed debate. But when you so there's so much hostility between these two camps is because when you put the two together, they collapse each other. They completely invalidate each other. And so, like I was saying to Aaron last week, is like same thing if you take somebody of a strict faith and compare their faith to a different faith, nothing but hostility happens there because they can't both be right, and the insecurity that's built when they two come face to face, they can't handle it because they can't both be right. And that's what we're seeing here happen is just so much hostility. And most people outside don't understand it, don't see what's going on here. But yeah, it's the same exact thing that drives religious hostility and also religious affiliation is that kind of in-group validation and how scary anything outside of it is. But yeah, that's what I think's going on.
You got to break up those groups.
And it's scary because I think the similarity is that it's a worldview, right? It's a way, it's a lens through which they're looking at not just the trans experience, but the whole world and how all these complex relationships are fitting together. And so it is scary when somebody's worldview is being challenged and shattered. But
and your instinct is to block that out.
Yeah.
But gray is where life is. Gray is where mental health strives. But gray is also the hardest place to be. So people are always wanting to put people black or white. But unfortunately, people don't fit black or white. Sexuality teaches us that, right, Aaron? Change some things in your life, change a hormone, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, I'm attracted. So that changes. And, I had an experience, and I talk about it lightly, but the experience that I had, I swear to God, I'm going to write a book about it, was being married to an evangelical, being married to a woman who pushed me basically to think that I was a man in doing that. And then also knowing her family with all the conversations and the conversion therapy and you're going to hell, fire, damnation, this and that. And I hated those people. I fucking hated them. Well, I met them as Scott. They thought that I was just a straight man that saved her, right? And I hated them. Well, after a couple of years, I loved her family, every single one. And it gave me the perception that, hey, maybe the people that we hate, just have a different perception, just have a different life experience, just have a different hormone that they produce, just have a different, serotonin level, just has a different view, just has a different financial economy, just has different experiences, just has a different gender, just has different this. And the core of every human, there's very few evil people in the world. The core of human beings are good people. We want to do good. We want to help people. There's very few people that get off on hurting other people. And if we pull down the fact that nobody is black and nobody is white, and anybody that is black or white, they are not the healthy ones. It's in the middle. It's in the middle where you can say, you know what, I don't agree with you, Kenneth. I think that we could be good together, Kenneth. You might not think it, but I could put on some lipstick and we'll be good together. No, what I'm saying is that when we put ourselves in that gray area is when everything good happens. But people want to put us in black and people want to put us in white. I had some radical feminists that really went after me hard. And it hurt. It hurt because those are my people, right? Well, you know what?
Yes.
I decided that, they said a lot of stuff that I needed to listen to. They weren't all right about everything, and some of them were really, really fucking hateful. But if you allow yourself to come to that gray area, that's where all the solutions are. The trans agenda right now, the Morgan Ogres, the Yonics, and all the, people, they're black. There's nothing in the middle. There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. There's nothing good that comes out of evangelicals. There's nothing good of that. It's in the middle. All we are is combustible energy that's breaking that shit up because we know what's coming for these kids. Nobody else does. And if you watch children, if you are a parent, my son just fell in love for the first time in his life. And I see him in his eyes and how happy he is with what's happening with his future. I remember him at a year who would not sleep unless he was right here, and I saw all his trials and tribulations of life. I love that kid. If we take a little bit of that and put that into society, even into the evangelicals who we think that we would hate, which we wouldn't if we knew their past, if we knew why they thought that way, that might allow more people to get into the gray. And that is where solutions are, is in the gray. All we are is energy busting up the black and white.
What do you think? This is a hard question, but I mean, for those that are stuck in the trans ideology, what do you think they think happens if that bubble gets burst? Because we live outside of that bubble. So what do you think they think would happen if they just
invalidates them,
stopped thinking that way? Like, because they experience that they have strong emotions about that, right? I mean, we've all experienced what happens when you say anything that doesn't fit within that ideology. I mean, do you think that they? Well, here's one theory I've heard that somehow we've been brainwashed by these radical feminists or whoever, the Christians, or they think somebody's brainwashed us, and that they're just using us to achieve their political goal, and then they'll be done with us and stab us in the back. So that's one of the theories that I've heard out there. So there's this fear.
You've already
right?
stabbed me in the back, so I've already been there. I still love him though. Cool. You stabbed me in the back. I know that hurt. Can we talk now?
Because I arrived here not because anyone brainwashed me. I arrived here because I worked stuff out in my own head, and then I saw people that thought similarly to me. So, and I haven't disappeared, and I haven't imploded or anything. Like I think I'm doing okay, having arrived here. So,
you know why I think it people take it so seriously, trans ideology in black and white, is because, I mean, let's just get real. Can we just get real? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. If I'm out and, making a phone call in sales, when I get excited, my voice goes up and, if I'm not focused on that, people go, well, hey, how are you, sis? And it's embarrassing. I'm just like, oh God, I'm not doing that character very well. And so when people are embarrassed, it causes them to react certain ways, but it's reality. So for me, it's taken me a while to just, if somebody, misgenders me, it's not about me. It's not about them. It's about reality, and reality is all right. Reality lives in the gray. So, what it's worth.
Well, exactly. The question that came to my mind, Aaron, was what if the idea was put forward that we're just fine the way that we are, and actually society is what needs to change to accept that gender is a very complex construct, and people need to be allowed to express that construct however they wish, and then their biology is their biology, and how they express their gender is how they express their gender, and there is no need for complex medical interventions. We just, as a society and as a culture, as we're developing into this one world, whatever the heck it's getting called, oligarchy, that people can express their gender however they want, and I don't know if I'm expressing if I'm expressing this correctly, but why the hell couldn't I be a female-bodied person and be as masculine as I friggin' wanted to be? Like, I no longer have to defend my masculinity, so I find myself being far more feminine than I used to be when I was a woman trying to defend my right to be masculine. You got it, Scott. I saw the look. Yeah.
As Scott's making jewelry and.
Oh yeah, I would never do this before. I bought this kind of stuff for my daughter, by the way. Anyways. So I'm obsessed in it. I love making jewelry now. I don't care.
Yeah, and I think that very type of thinking and that very reasoning threatens the trans radical advocates, because then where would they be if people didn't need to transition? What the fuck is masculine, right? If you go back into history, is wearing a dress masculine or feminine? Well, let's go back 10,000 years.
Depends on what time frame.
Actually, wearing robes is very, very masculine. And the only people who girded their loins on a regular basis were menstruating women. So the whole idea of pants was, feminine. Is wanting to be a medical doctor masculine or feminine? Well, go back far enough, it was feminine. Come forward, it was masculine, and then feminine, and then masculine, and now it's becoming feminine again. So, all of these markers we use to say, oh, this boy is feminine. I think my one nephew is really lucky because he went through a stage where he was painting his nails and doing all sorts of stuff that would have been seen as feminine, and he would have been forced to transition if some of these trans radical activists had got to him. But now look at him, 20 years old, he's quite happy to be a boy. Or a
Isn't
young
that
man,
funny? I think
whatever
puberty,
you see 20-year-olds as.
Puberty really does set people through. I had both my sons that when they started hit puberty, they shaved their legs. They hated it. It was different. They hated it. And I'm like, oh God. And I'm, because I'm in society too. Now they're, totally fine with it. My daughter was really into masculine stuff. And so it's just, I think we're reacting too much as parents. We're reacting too much. People say, oh, my daughter just said that she's non-binary. How do I react? Okay. All right. Check me in, and oh, my daughter or son said that they're homosexual. All right. Well, they're 12. They're not having sex with anybody. Why are we talking about this? Oh, move on. I think we overreact to stuff. I think we absolutely overreact to stuff.
Yeah, and where did this concept that gender is fixed at 4 years old come from? Because the only place I've really seen that quoted a lot is in the trans trans research stuff. Oh, people knew from the time they were 3. People knew from the time they were 4. But where is that really? Because with the kids I've been around raising as an aunt, because that's what I am in my family, I'm their aunt. Kids don't really get the sense of who they are as male or female until their early 20s. That's when I see that really starting to gel for an individual. Otherwise, they're constantly being given messages about how to be a boy as a boy, or how to be a girl as a girl, and then how to be a young man or a young woman, and then how to be a man or a woman. And then in their 20s, when they experience the emancipation in this culture and they're recognized as adults, that's when who they are as male or female seems to really begin to gel for them. So where did we get this idea that gender is fixed at 4? Because there's a couple in BC that successfully had their 4-year-old transitioned. Yeah, I know it's a nightmare, but it's British Columbia.
Where it came from is a good question.
Yeah.
It's a whole societal capture right now.
I had a conversation with Stella O'Malley last week.
I love that conversation, by the way. That was great.
It is.
Oh,
good.
thank you. And I was surprised, I think, because we're all in our own realm, right? I was surprised with how much she dealt with gender dysphoria. You know, I mean, Stella's a hottie, man. She's like she's a hottie and like feminine and just, she crosses her legs and does that little sexy stuff. And it's like, wait a second, you had gender where? And I remember sitting back going, now I'm all fucked up. I thought it was just homosexual people. Now it's everybody. And so, of course, I wanted to do black or white. So Stella went, nope, it's the gray again. And I went, oh, shit. So gender dysphoria hits people. And and it comes back to the fact that, keeps coming back to the fact that as human beings, we try to make everything black and white. And it's just not. It's not. And transgenderism is basically trying to put people black or white. I mean, talk about misogynistic. I mean, basically what makes you a male or female is boys that like this and girls that like this, and girls and boys come in different ways, right? Women are supposed to be very submissive and this and that. Well, don't tell my mother that. My mother's coming to stay with me for a week, and my ex-mother-in-law, who's like a hippie, who says, "Oh, love is or happiness is an inside job." And my mom that wears fake eyelashes and everybody thinks is a drag queen at 70 is like, "Fuck that, Melody. Let's go get some margaritas." Women aren't supposed to act like that. Does that mean my mom's not a woman? I'll guarantee you won't think she's a man. So she doesn't fit. She's in the gray, but she looks like how women are supposed to look. She has, she doesn't talk the way women are talk, but so it's all gray, right?
Yeah, and we all come from different cultures. Like, I guess, kind of going back to what you were saying, Kenneth, like different cultures have different expectations for the sexes, and we all come from different backgrounds, and yet we've all arrived at this decision to medically transition. And the problem I have with the gender ideology now is that only works if you're in certain circles. Like if you're in these certain queer circles where everyone else believes what you believe and talks the way you talk, just like you were saying, Scott, with the evangelicals, it works as long as they stick with their evangelical circles. But I don't live in that world. I want to fit into my family. I want to fit into my community. I grew up in a small farming community, and I value my own culture, as do other people. And so I can't take those ideologies into little farming community with a bunch of truckers and cowboys and farmers. Like, it doesn't work, right? So, and I think that's the reality a lot of these kids are going to have to face, right? It is, as they get older and they go out into the world and they're traveling and they're moving to different towns and they're wanting to start a family and they're wanting to just live their life. I think that's where some of these ideologies are going to break down for them, and they're going to be kind of lost. I think the bottom, the ground under their feet is going to be washed away at some point, whether it's, they have a health problem because their body's breaking down, or whatever that is for people, there's always a point where reality is going to confront us, and that really rigid orthodoxy isn't going to work.
And that's why that instinct seems to be a hostility. When confronted with anything that challenges that orthodoxy, is just hostile, and they block. You can't do that in real life, and eventually, it's going to come crashing down. And like going back to what Scott was saying, and then what foundation do you have to deal with that when everything's kind of propagated on this very loose religious. It's a very flimsy ideology, and that's why I think there's so much fear that it's going to, like why they look at us with so much disdain, is because it's such a loose ideology, and they have to cling so tightly to it, and there's so much hostility that has to prop it all up, and but yeah.
I spent a lot of my career in telecom and advertising, and one of the things that I don't think people realize is from an advertising perspective, transgenderism is like and should be studied as the best advertising campaign ever. It has given it to, and it has given things like, and this is the thing that people don't realize, in Texas, where they have a tort reform act, where basically medical malpractice is almost unheard of in Texas. That's the hub for transgender healthcare, if you can believe it. Texas, of all places, the Republican Texas, right? So all the shitty doctors and surgeons are all moving there and starting practices to do that there. We have a very conservative, evangelical governor, right? Has always been against, anything LGBT. Well, it should be all over the news that Abbott took $250,000 from a gender clinic. And next week, all the bills that were there to safeguard kids from medical transition were pushed off. So the first time in history, Abbott goes, maybe we need to be more loving to the LGBT. And people are sitting back going, he's had a revolution. Abbott's a wonderful person. He's a wonderful person. No, he's not. He's a fucking snake, is what he is. But the advertising that is out there is lifting the Abbotts, and we get the little sound bites about transphobic, about this, about that. And the thing that drives me nuts is, what are the people that's missing from this conversation? What's missing? We've got the evangelicals, we've got the feminists, we've got the women, we've got the men, we've got everybody. Who's missing from this talk? Because we only have a couple of jackasses that stand up, like Morgan Ogre. Where are the trans people in the conversation? I read the articles, I read all this kind of stuff. I go, okay, where's the trans person? Where's the trans person? And I see, the dipshits like Morgan. But that's it. Those are the only people. Dipshits. We are missing from the conversation.
Well, try to join the conversation and they silence you. I mean, I tried for 2 years to be involved with trans rights activism that's going on in Saskatchewan. And, I was told repeatedly that as a male, basically their message was they were seeking to amplify female voices within the movement. So they explained to me how my opinion was inappropriate.
Do they actually say female?
Yes.
So, meaning the trans women?
Yes. meaning trans women. Yes.
Oh my! Oh, okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes, so really what this is, really, let's name this what it is. I mean, this is going to piss people off, but I mean, Scott's opened that door already, so let's just go there. Really what this is it's a very misogynistic movement where the ways in which we were socialized as our biological sex and certain traits which tend to fit certain biological categories. We've seen this play out in trans politics, where this language of who's oppressed more gets thrown around and used, but really the dynamic is trans women who are biologically male and were socialized male have all the say and tend to push around those that were biologically female, and we're just so, we're the peacekeepers, and oh, let's just not fight, right? Let's
Prop
let's
it all
just
up.
get along, and let's, yeah, and
Let's love
so
each other.
really what
Let's
this
we're
is
not women. Let's love each other.
so it's a bunch of men bullying women all over again, right? It's the same misogynistic crap that we had come so far as lesbians and women, and now we're being told to shut up, because we're men and our voices shouldn't matter as much as the trans women's. But really, when you pull the veil away, really what that is the men telling the women to shut up.
Yeah, and there are also
Yes.
typically heterosexual males at that who are now the most marginalized women. Are literally heterosexual males who think it's hot to present as women, and most people don't understand that's exactly what that's exactly what trans activism is. And maybe, okay, so going back, why do we think that suddenly a child knows what their gender is? We're still talking about the same people as people who realized from a young age that they were aroused at the idea of being girls. So we open the door, I guess we'll go there all the way, is that this is what the majority of trans activism is heterosexual males who have known all along they wished for certain reasons that they were women. It's not the reason that they're projecting to the outside world as to why this should be validated. It's because, man, they wish they were hotter as women now, and they would be if they had been medically interfered with at a younger age. And
that's really what it comes down to. You're right. Is aesthetics. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have trans women like Debbie Hayton and Fionn and all that kind of stuff who are awesome. Have you ever sat back and watched the way Debbie talks to people? It cracks me up when I read some of her tweets that are just so not in your face, just like, when did I exactly become female? How did that happen? It just cracks me up. And what is, she's a gray, she's a ball, right? She's mixing it all up. We all do it different ways. But there are some awesome transgender women. There are. And then there are.
But they take a lot of abuse for being awesome.
Yeah, they do. And they are awesome. We get a lot of abuse too. Anytime you try to break up anything that's black or white, it's, it goes against somebody's ideology, right? Ideology, when you try to break that up, pisses people off. But we all have, and Aaron, you and I talk about that. Different pieces to the puzzle of solving it. Trans women are a huge part of the piece to fix it. I mean, Fionn and Debbie and all that kind of stuff. They come to me all the time and go, "That was kind of a jerky thing to do." Okay, and I'm receptive to it. So it's all of us are a piece. We're all kind of an energy that's busting stuff up, and we're busting, people up that need to be busted up because it doesn't make sense, and it's hurting people. It's hurting people, and I've said this already, but I'm on the forefront of this. When these kids are suicidal, it's me that they come to. It's Trey voices that they come to, and I channel them off. I mean, I hear it, and it pisses me off when people sit back and trans women sit back and just push this ideology, because I deal with it daily. So I might be intense about it because I'm fucking dealing with it. You're not. Start doing something, start screaming, start adulting louder, start doing something, because it's not transphobic to say, hey, you know what, this is cosmetic surgery, some people benefit from it, it's cool, but yeah, it's not for a kid because you're taking away their foundation time. We have all these people that don't have any foundations at all. I mean, we all talked about the time period where we sat back and went, I think I need to evaluate this as adults that had foundations.
Yeah.
These kids don't have it, and they're flipping out. It's like the kids that you let them do whatever they want, and then they're 18, 20 years old, and you're wondering why they're having a hard time holding down a job or, doing the right things. You didn't teach them nothing. They didn't have that foundation of hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where do they go for that help, right? When anyone that kind of advertises we are here to support the trans community, they're so steeped in that ideology that for anyone to where that starts to break down for them, and then they're having that oh shit moment, where do they go to just have a realistic conversation where, you know, the rainbows aren't going to be blown up their asses, because where they can just unpack
Nowhere.
what's going on for
No,
them.
they come here. They go, I get them.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I may come off like an asshole, but I don't say no to any parent. You can ask any parent that, you know, emails me at 3:00 in the morning. I need to talk to you. My life is coming to an end. I get those daily. And, you know, in between work and this, I'm talking, going, okay, go to this, go here, go there, because there's not many of us doing it. I mean, and nobody wants, I don't want to out my career. I don't want to out this. I don't want people to think I'm transphobic. And for me, it's like, I know I'm not here very long. I almost died. So fuck it. You know, yeah, I'm here. Give it to me. But there's only so much that I can do. You know, against a $1 billion industry, you know, me in my basement trying to figure out therapists for these kids that have no foundation. You know, and basically, and these kids, by the way, their parents have pushed them to transition. Yeah, they don't talk to them anymore because they think they're detrans. And that's bad. And so now they don't have their parents because they didn't affirm their ideology that, you know, basically their parents might have to sit back and go, hey, maybe that was a jackass move for me to do. So now it's, you know, I'm not going to talk to my kid. I mean, it's nuts what's happening. It's nuts.
So parents who were pushing their children to transition, and then the child decided not to transition, are now not talking to their children?
Yep.
That's fucked up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy shit. I had only until now dealt with that in the theoretical, thinking that would be starting to happen in 10 years. I didn't realize it was already happening.
Take that one parent that talked to the woman that was running for president and paraded her, you know, daughter as a trans male. Take that person at 25. That woman who's made her life on books and transition, all that kind of stuff. What happens when that child comes out and go, what in the fuck did you do to me? What about the one that was on Good Morning America? Did you see that one this week on Good Morning America? No. Basically the drag queen kid, it's like 8 or 9. Yeah, they don't show the video of that child going, Mom, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like this. And the mom in the background going, she's being her authentic self. Well, what happens when that dude gets to be 22 years old and goes, hey, wait a second, you cut my penis off. I have early onset osteoporosis. I'm suicidal. I can't date anybody because nobody knows who the fuck I am. I've got early onset, you know, heart disease. I don't have a foundation of anything. I don't know where the fuck I belong. And now I'm going to kill myself. That's what's happening. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Like, what happened to, who is that doctor? Dr. Money? Who did, yeah, the one who was doing all the research on forcing boys to transition to be girls, right? Because they had microphalluses, right? And he did that really famous research on that.
Reiners.
On David Reimer.
The one with, Reimer, yeah. So how come we're ignoring this research that says it's a really bad idea for parents to force children to transition? Because
it's a gray area. Because if you say that,
where did we stop paying attention to that? Yeah,
it's a gray area, right?
It's like the Canadian conversion statute stuff the bill that's being brought forward. It actually does nothing to prevent a trans radical activist from transitioning a child from male to female forcibly. And that's one of the big problems with the bill, that everybody is saying, yeah, no, if it's going to be conversion therapy, then it's got to swing both ways. Right? But how did all that research get to be just ignored?
I say this in interviews, but I wish people would really do a visual on it, do a actual visual. I have done this for a living, sales presentations. Numbers are a big deal.
Yep.
You know, that study that we did that did 4,000% increase in the UK, if you take those ratios of just that area in the UK, and you mirror it to the same, you know, a child to parent formula, who's transitioning, who's not, and you pour that over Australia, you pour that over Canada, you pour that over the United States, just in North America and maybe a little bit of Europe. In 20 years, between 18 and 22% of the population is going to be trans and in need of hormones. Well, what does that mean? That means that $1.3 million per child that they convince is transgender, the pharmaceutical companies are going to benefit from that. And I don't care if you're in Canada. Guess who you're buying your hormones from? USA. Thank you. Your country has to pay for them. I mean, Canada's an imbecilic company or country. They are basically generating massive profits for the United States. And they're listening to companies like Lupron that was deemed a criminal enterprise by my country in 2003 for basically lying on risks and all that kind of stuff. That's the company that can't afford to do a $10 million study on medically transitioning kids. They wrote a check for $874 million going, hey, sorry, US, we lied about that. Fuck it, we'll do it. We don't have the money for that. We're not going to do that study. You know, and your country's going, can we buy some more Lupron? We're very loving. We're very loving. That's fine. That's not just $1 million industry, $1 billion industry. That is a $1 trillion industry at a time period when Netflix is trying to get $2 or $3 more a month, because that's the model, the business model now. Everybody wants to know how much they're going to make next month. Well, you put somebody on hormones and hormone blockers as a kid, that's a lifetime, dude. That's a lifetime. That's a check you can guarantee every single month. And then on top of that, for your country to buy those products, guess what happens when you prescribe them to children? They make 8 times more money every time your imbecilic country writes hormone blockers to kids. That's $40,000 worth of profit every year.
You're talking about the exact same model that advertising companies used to promote tobacco. The model was based on the idea that if you could get a boy to try tobacco just once prior to the age of 7 and a girl to try it just once prior to the age of 8, or I could be a year off on those, then you would have X percentage of lifetime tobacco users. Yeah.
And then,
Wow.
you know, but you can't say anything because, you know, we're black and we're the trans community, right? We can't say anything because we don't want to be transphobic. We don't want to be transphobic. And we got, you know, the Good Morning America, you know, audience. Here's the truth. That dude, that kid, he's probably a gay boy or a very feminine man. Well, how about we celebrate that? That's being loving. That's the gray, right? That's the gray looking at that little boy going, hey, man, you want to dress in drag? Let me ask my mom to come over. She'll teach you how to put on fake eyelashes, and she's the biggest drag queen ever, but she's a female. We'll figure that out. That's the loving thing to do. Yeah. That's the loving thing to do. And then when that kid's done with that, because we all go through different things, you know, no, mom, dad, I'm not into that anymore. Now I'm into army shirts. All right, let me get my dad over because he's a fucking butch. He loves army. We'll play that. And then you go through those different things with your kids, right? Until they get about 22 and they kind of go, all right, now I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The kid is not the problem.
Nope. Kenneth, you're absolutely right. The kid is not the problem.